Thank you. Let me state first the basic premise of this presentation, and that is clearly stated: the only business function that generates revenue is the sales function. Everything else is an overhead and supported by sales. That is why creating, maintaining a sales force is so important, and the way that that is done is not by accident, not by serendipity, but only by good sales management that gives direction and control to the personnel, supports them, equips them, assigns them, compensates them, and motivates them so that these tasks can be accomplished on an ongoing and consistent basis. What are we doing here? My slide won't change for some reason. There it goes. Okay. So what are the objectives of sales management? I'm not going to read these slides to you, but sales volume is important. But I always used to say, and still say, that margin is better than volume. That's where profits come in. You can literally sell your way into oblivion. I have known several companies have done it simply because they were not turning a profit. And then growth, increasing your sales through relationship building and through the provision of the highest possible quality services or products. And that is the sales function, is the building of that relationship and the maintaining of those relationships with your clients, who are in a very real way your partners.
To keep the mouse on the slide too.
I keep going and wait. Oh, is that what it is? Ah, okay. So what qualifies to lead a sales management organization? Often the opposite attributes of a successful salesperson. Successful salespeople are very, very aggressive. They can be very friendly. They can be extremely extroverted. And they can also be people who cannot, for one reason or other, convert to management. A typical error is to promote your senior salesperson to the sales management position, and that gives you two problems. First, you've just lost your best salesperson, and second, you now have a person in a management position who cannot handle it because they cannot teach what needs to go on, and they cannot support it. The various tasks require this. Right? The principles of structure, authority, responsibility, performance, and coordination are all critical to the sales organization and its function. Right? How those people work jointly to achieve a defined goal is the critical thing to take away from this, because it is about the human relationships inside the sales force, and therefore the relationships of the sales force with the clients. Because remember, they're the person that I meet. I'm your client. I may not ever meet you as the president of the company. I might not ever meet you as the CFO of the company. I might never meet you as the chief engineer of production, but I'm going to meet your salespeople. They are your front door. They are the people that I relate to as your company. All right. Organizational structure is different. One is a functional organization, focuses on specialization so that you get a functional responsibility and are permitted to control and direct the salesperson through their immediate superior. That would be applicable especially in a technical sales field. For instance, if you look at the structure of Boeing's aircraft sales division and the commercial sales, they are a functional organization because they are selling a very technical product. Organizational structure can be horizontal, right? It's specialized structure. It may be geographical. It may be product, as in the case of Boeing that I mentioned. It may be a market or customer. You may have a group of customers in which I specialize. Let's say they're naval architecture customers, or they're lawyers, or they're accountants. I may be a specialist in that area, and so you have me roving the entire world. Or I may have a defined physical market, and you may have a combination of these specialized structures. A line sales organization is an alternative method where you have a head of marketing, your sales manager that reports to them, and then area sales managers in your sales force. This has some advantages. It has very clear lines of authority. It can respond quickly, and it's reasonably low cost. However, because of the distance there can be a disconnect between the marketing and the sales, and it's weak on the marketing inputs. It also, because of the hierarchical structure, somewhat impedes the flow of information from the sales force to the marketing people, giving you feedback on what works and what clients find appealing. And then because the sales manager essentially controls this. A functional sales organization has your head of marketing who then supervises the sales people and the sales force directly, perhaps through a subordinate, but focuses on brand promotion, uses market research to support the sales force, and brings marketing services to their attention and allows them to flexibly implement their sales. And also, and I really should have these arrows going both ways, because it also means that the sales force can feed back to marketing services and say, this particular brochure or this particular advertisement or this particular method of informing the customers of our service is not doing what it's supposed to do. They can also work a great deal with brand clarity. If I say to you, Mercedes-Benz, everybody that on this webinar and anyone you walk into the street immediately has a whole raft of impressions simply because I said Mercedes-Benz, because they have a very, very good brand. And then market research. What are your customers looking for? What problems do they have? And that information comes from your sales force. And then your planning and strategy and central organization works out through this sales organization so that you get customer satisfaction teams working with sales and marketing, determining pricing, promotion, the channels through which are you going to go through dealers, secondary, you're going direct with the company, and that feeds back into the operations team. What are you producing? What are the quality problems? What should quality assurance be looking at? How should engineering change or evolve? And then customer support. Obviously, your salespeople, if they want customer satisfaction, you will need customer support. This is increasingly true when we are talking about services, because they are not tangible. If I buy, in the old days, a typewriter from you, right, it either types or it doesn't. Okay? It makes good, clean copy or it does not. It is more problematic when you are selling a service. Is this a good audit is a lot harder question to answer than is this a good typewriter. How does sales relate to marketing? Sales and advertising both stimulate demand. The idea of people coming to your office to inform you of their products stimulates your demand. And they need to be blended artfully. Salespersons can improve the advertising effective, and advertising needs to support sales and be when and where they need it most. If you're advertising on the Super Bowl and none of your clientele watches American football, you've wasted your money. If I'm your salesman, I walk in and say, did you see our Super Bowl ad? And they go, no, I was watching the World Cup. You have a serious disconnect. And then marketing and sales information. Data is needed for analysis of sales problems. What is the resistance issue? How are we moving this forward? What do people want? And all that raw information is collected by the salespeople as a result of their relationships with your clients and prospective clients when they get information back. If you look at the development of the smartphones, much of what has been done has been information that's come back through the sales channel. What would I find out that was neat? So sales and service contributes to status success, sales and distribution, minimize out-of-stock situation. You don't want me in your office selling you something that I can't deliver. You're much better off promoting the idea that you under-promise and over-deliver. If I say I'm going to get that to you in 2 weeks and it comes there in a week, you're a happy person. If I say I'm going to get it to you in a week and it doesn't get there for 2 weeks, you're an unhappy person, and that is simple reality. That is relationship. Sales affects production. Sales should affect R&D, and sales finance obviously are tied together because the cost of sales, that sort of thing, is something that is going to affect your overall profitability. When your sales planning is a managerial function, salespeople themselves are frequently not very good about this. They are very, very good at building relationships. They are very good about presenting the strengths of your product. They are very good and can be very good at doing the actual relationship building. But the actual planning is often something that, because of their natures, because of the nature of the work they do not have a long-range plan in mind. And so if you're looking at 3 to 5 year projections, you ought to know what your clients are looking for and what they want. You can do this in a number of ways. You can look at past trends, previous year sales, always remembering that that orientation assumes that the past is somehow predictive of the future. And you call Barry and ask them how that worked out for them. So I think you have to be wiser than that and look at how your planning improves profitability, how or why a region or a territory or a particular product ceases to contribute to your overall picture, and why an account has been discontinued, why products become de-emphasized. I read an article today. The president of Novartis, the large pharmaceutical company, is engaged in this process now, trying to figure out what's our core business and what things that we've been de-emphasizing should we simply get rid of. Accepting private brand orders, especially if you're a manufacturer or in the case of consulting firms such as ours, if I accept a private brand order, essentially what I have done is provided our good or service to someone else under their name. So it tends to undercut your brand. It can be good if you're trying to build volume. And then variance between budget and actual sales. If your sales plan is accurate, there's going to be variance. Nobody, if anybody, you're a senior official, and somebody comes to you with a budget that they implemented exactly to the dollar, be suspicious, because you can't do it. Can't be done. There's going to be some variance, but you need to examine the variance and extract from that data the information that lies in there about your sales force, about your products, and about the continuity. Sales planning, you want to plan for new business. You want to incorporate into your vision, your mission, and your goals a strategy that drives you to get new business. If you are complacent, the term in the United States is a coupon clipper. In other words, I know a person who had for many years the AutoCAD franchise, if you will, with a Boeing company. And his name is Robert McNeil, and Robert very successfully got in there early, and then basically all of the sales of AutoCAD that went to Boeing he got credit for. So he clipped coupons for many years until someone more active had a strategy, went in with the mission to create higher service levels, achieve several goals, and implemented action plans that undercut his work, and he now no longer gets clipped coupons. So he had to be looking for new business, or should have been looking for new business. Key sales management function of the planning, the organizing, training and motivating people, controlling and leading them. Organizing good salespeople and training them, investing in them, is critical because sales techniques change. A lot of this grows out of organizational psychology and individual psychology, motivating them. The thing that a salesperson hears most often, the word they hear most often, is no. No, I will not accept an appointment with you. No, I don't want to hear about your product. No, I won't buy this stuff this week, etc. They need to have continuous motivation to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get out there and hit it again. You need to also control what they do. You do not want them promising things you cannot deliver because they want to build or maintain a relationship. You do not want them going in directions that are inconsistent with the company's overall plans. And then you need to lead them. They need to have the feeling that you have their back. They need to have the feeling that you know what the direction is. They need to have the feeling that when they come back and put in an order, things are going to happen. Forecasting is a key planning tool. Now, there are a lot of people that will tell you that sales forecasts are written in sand on the seashore, and when the tide comes in, it washes them away. I don't believe that. However, I do believe this. The plan is not something that is written in stone. You cannot, in fact, decide we're going to sell 15 units by December 15th. You can have goals, right? But you want to have total sale goals, product levels. You want to know what the industry's doing. Is your industry suffering a downslide? For instance, not too long ago in 2009, the heavy equipment field, I have a couple friends who sell heavy equipment, and they were having a terrible time because nobody was constructing anything because of the global financial crisis. So the industry went down, but as long as their company sales were in line, they had other incentives that kept them motivated and going on. So you want to have some time period forecasts that are different. A long-range forecast is by its very nature less definitive than the short term. The sales goal that you want me as your salesperson to reach this month, right, contributes to that medium and long range, but it is not the same. And so it's a great deal more specificity. The planning process comes out of a very important sort of human resource-based plan. You need to know how it is these people are going to do these things. So your sales plan, which is the units or the service units or the sales goals, your services that you intend to reach, do you have the capacity to do that? If you have a work for 10 salespeople of a high professional caliber and you don't have 10 salespeople, then your capacity is a problem. If you have a production plan, whether it's a good or service, that says, for instance, you're in the United States and you're going to be providing tax services to people by April 15th, you need to have sufficient people to do the work. Do you have a cash flow plan? Can you actually put sales out, fund the cash until you get the receipts in? Can you actually do that? There are a lot of companies that fall down on this. The cash flow plan does not come through, and they have a problem that backs up into production, backs up into capacity. And finally, a procurement plan. How do you get your raw materials? How do you get the things that you need to make things go forward? The bottom, but the most important thing, the foundation, is your human resource plan. How are you going to acquire the human resources that you need to accomplish your sales plan and goal? Why forecast? If you don't know where you're going, if you don't know where the customers are located, if you don't know how much they're going to buy, you have no way to control production. So you could overproduce or underproduce. Industry estimates is one way to do this. What exactly is going on? How are things proceeding? I was consulting with some people in Australia a few years ago who made mining equipment, and the mining boom was going on very heavily, and they were gearing up. And I pointed out to them that the Chinese, which were the major export client of the Australian mining industry, were slowing down. They were cutting back. Their forecasts for growth were going down, and so I suggested to several of my clients that they do likewise. Some of them took that advice, some of them did not, but those who did not wound up with inventory. And when you have inventory, it's going to hit your cash flow plan pretty hard. And then how do you collect, analyze, and interpret the data? You can get all kinds of numbers, and you can get absolutely no information out of it if you cannot analyze it successfully. And then you make predictions, knowing that they're going to be realized to a degree. Geographic area forecasts are, again, if you are in a territory-based system, for sales. In other words, if I have North Africa and you have Southern Africa, and we know what the difference is, and someone else has, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, whatever, we have this geographic area forecast, and you can break that down based on the nation. What is going on in the nation? In Thailand, where I'm currently based, there has been some political upheavals. That has had effects rippling throughout the system, both internally and externally, especially in the export markets. What's going on there? Adjust your forecasts. The region or the zone. Are you, during the Asian financial crisis a few years ago, the so-called tigers economies were having a serious problem. The entire region slowed down economically, and so sales of various things were attenuated. Or a territory. Do you have your organization broken out into territories, and if so, how does your branch or district forecast its sales? And then individual customers. If you have close enough relationships with a large enough customer base, you can indeed ask them what their plans are, and they will tell you. Forecasting approaches. Top-down approach is, as it says, the forecast is broken down by region, district, territory, salesperson in some cases, individual sales, customer quotas. The bottom-up builds from the bottom up, from the individual customer to the individual salesperson or individual sales territory to the ranch, to the region, and so on up the line. Methods, qualitative methods, executive opinion. I think that we are going to do more tax returns this year. I think that we're going to send more luxury vehicles this year. And in many cases, if you read Jack Welch's book, From the Gut, this is what successful executives and senior editors do. Jack Welch said that he didn't care what kind of presentation. They didn't want to see the slides or anything else. He wanted to look the people in the eye and see because he got his executive opinion from their eyes and body language. There's what's called the Delphi method, named after the oracle. But this is a panel. You get a panel of experts in the industry together. Disaster recovery is a good recent example. There's going to be a lot of disaster recovery activities gearing up in many countries, so we are going to manufacture more products or provide more services. The Salesforce composite. This is where the salespeople's relationships come in, and this could be one of your best methods if you have a good sales force, especially if you have what's called an outside sales force. Salespeople whose primary place of business is in their customer's office as opposed to in your office. These people, if they have a very good relationship, the customers will simply say to them, look, and when I was in the computer business, we had some very good relationships with large hospitals, which was a primary client base, and doctors' clinics, and they would say, look, we're going to replace all the computers in the hospital or in this set of at least 40 clinics that we have over the next year, right? We've got this many, so we have an idea now of how many computers and printers and software, et cetera, they're going to be buying, and we aggregate that up into a larger whole so that we know what we're doing. And then test marketing is sometimes used, although primarily in new market activities with products. You see it. Quantitative methods, there's a lot of different econometric analyses. The difficulty with all of these, in my opinion, is that they all rely on the idea that the past is prologue, that what has gone on in the past will, with some mathematical manipulation, tell us what's going on in the future. They can be very useful. They can also, if solely relied on, be very deceptive. The Australian heavy equipment people, mining equipment people, who simply use these as opposed to considering some of the qualitative factors, for instance, the Chinese slowdown, got surprised unpleasantly. But these methods do have their uses. when you are managing sales force, there are a lot of selling situations that they come into. Customers' intentions and expectations are specific. They have a particular goal in mind. I want mobile service that will cover this area. I want insurance that will cover these risks. I want financing will do this. All right? Customers are contacted over the phone, or the customer's an organizational buyer. Customers contacted over the phone is not someone, unless you have an existing relationship with them, that you have an ongoing relationship with. It is someone that you are disembodied voice. And so the kinds of people that do that kind of work successfully are different people than people who deal, for instance, with the organizational buyer, who goes to a professional purchasing agent and seeks to build a relationship with them, and that is also what's going on when customers are seeking service or a solution to a problem. Well, one of the things that we do a great deal of is strategy consultants, is corporate social responsibility, that sort of thing. People are seeking a solution to something that, for instance, in the case of the Thailand Stock Exchange, the SET as it's known, has recently come out with some mandates. Any company that's listed on the SET must meet certain CSR levels, and we have solutions for clients that they can look at and we can implement for them. The customer in a retail store, obviously a very different situation. I won't worry about that too much. Cold calling is can be okay, but you really need to have, if you're thinking about sophisticated sales, sophisticated goods and services, you really need to have a relationship with people. This tends to work better for fairly small items, and can be valuable if you have a good product to sell. Pharmaceutical selling is a very expert field, creates a whole different group of potential problems and opportunities, because in many cases you're selling to doctors. In other words, Dr. Jones, I want you to prescribe this medication as opposed to the alternatives you have for these particular clients. And then creative selling. There are all sorts of things that salespeople can do. Advertising campaign is one example, but there are a lot of other things that people can do that creates value for the client, and that is what your sales force is designed to do. Your budget is another part of the sales management function that's extremely important. How are you going to allocate your resources? Because remember, there are a lot of people that don't like budgets, right? And they say, well, you know, I don't think in numbers. No one thinks in numbers. But what the budget is an allocation of resources, physical resources and sales personnel, and it is the foundation on which you plan sales objectives. If you do not have a good budget and good budget performance, you cannot say that you have a plan, because the budget, in my opinion, is the plan expressed in numbers. Right? It is your commitment of resources. And if I say to you, I plan to sell a whole bunch of laptop computers this year, and you look at my budget and find that I have allocated very few resources to the salespeople, the cash plan, etc., you know that I'm not serious about it, or I don't know what I'm doing. It is a formal and somewhat intricate process, and approaches are incremental. Right? In other words, we're going to increase or decrease based on some increment that we determine, such as we know that Chinese activity is going to drop off 7%, so we're going to decrement, in that case, or incremental down our sale forecast by 7%. Or it can be zero-based. The zero-based is extremely intensive, quantitatively and qualitatively, and only is really practical when you are selling very high-end items of one type or another. And then in a volatile economic climate, and if that isn't the one we're in now, I don't know what the heck you're thinking we're doing. Right? You can be optimistic, realistic, or pessimistic, and I suggest that you do all three, that you have the worst case scenario, etc., and find that middle ground so that you can succeed and survive and prosper regardless of the other factors involved, including past trends, your sales force estimates, trade prospects, what is going on in your market. This, I would argue, is precisely the problem that BlackBerry ran into. For years, they had the market cornered on the sort of personal communicator market. It was a cell phone and a text messaging. You got your emails and everything else. They had proprietary servers. They really had it tied up pretty well. And all of a sudden, these wise guys at Apple come with a smartphone, and they're sunk. And now they're scrambling to try to catch up, and they have a fairly serious problem. I think that they probably focused too much on the present scenario, on the present time, and did not get out to realize what the customers were doing and what the market was doing. Government policies can be extremely important, especially if they are fluid and changing. If, for instance, your sales force cannot enter a certain country for some reason or another, then you have a problem. So government policies, tax policies, etc., can be very, very important, should be considered. How many people do you need? Very complicated. There are budgetary methods, analytical methods to determine this. How you generate this, there are really three ways to do it. Sales territory is one approach. You assign the existing and potential company in an area, right, or in a market. Right? So the territory may be Thailand, or it might be Southeast Asia, and I can go any place in there. A reason for territories, it can improve customer coverage. I become more familiar with the environment. I understand the customs and culture better. I understand what's going on, and also you can evaluate the salesman's performance in terms of both their selling activities and their sales expenses. And because I keep coming around, because I become familiar to you, you can improve customer relations. Now, I once had a customer tell me that I was more like a friend or a colleague who dropped by to see them than a salesman, and I thought that was the ultimate compliment, because they didn't see me as someone who was coming there to hassle them into buying something. They saw me as a person who worked with them, coming to see them on a regular basis with news they could use, with information, with products certainly to sell, but also with their best interest in mind. And customers like that, relationships like that, are very, very important. If you're going to design a territory as a manager, selection of a basic geographical unit, and try to determine the sales potential present in that unit. If you are selling automobiles and there are no roads, you have less of a sales potential unless you're selling off-road vehicles. Combining basic units into tentative territories. Figure out what's going on. All right? Figure out how this logically fits together. And remember, political boundaries frequently make no economic sense. Okay? If you're in Thailand, in certain areas, you are effectively in Cambodia in terms of the market. Right? It's two different countries. You still need a passport to cross the border, but by golly, when you're dealing in that area, they make sense in that way. And then adjust for differences in coverage. How can I get around? Right? How are those tentative territories making sense? When you design a territory, build this thing up, how frequent do you want the salespeople to be calling on your customers? It really depends on what they're doing. If they're selling large capital items that are going to be infrequently purchased, you want them to maintain a relationship, but you are certainly not going by in the same frequency as if, for instance, you sell hardware to a chain of hardware stores and need to go from one to another and take the inventory so that you can restock. You need to decide call frequency and calculate total number of calls in the unit, estimate the capacity of the salespeople, and make your tentative territories that way. And then see how it works. All right? Always remain flexible. Breakdown method is just the opposite. You figure out the sales that are expected, make your tentative territories, and move on. Scheduling and control. Maintain lines of communication with your salespeople. One of the biggest problems, especially with outside salespeople, is they go off and you don't see them and you lose communication with them. You don't want your outside salespeople sitting in the bloody office. I was running a computer facility for MicroAge in Portland, Oregon. I had a couple of allegedly outside salespeople who never left the bloody office except to go to lunch. And so we got rid of them. But some of the other people I would see once a week physically. But we emailed, we talked on the phone. I said, what are you doing? What's going on? What can we help you out with? What do you need? Because what you're trying to do is make sure your territory is covered well with the minimum effort. And you want to know what these people are doing, right? When they're going to plan and how they're improving customer satisfaction, because the point of the sales force is to generate customer satisfaction, obviously. Quotas, salespeople thrive on quotas. Good salespeople will make a lot of money if you apply the quotas and the individuals correctly. But they're simply management tools. It tells people where you want the effort placed. If I tell you that I want to see this many computers or this many of a certain volume of a certain drug or this many tax services or whatever put forward, that's what I'm telling the salespeople. I am directing their efforts. And then provide standard performance. I also, in turn, tell you what I'm expecting you to do, and I'm going to review you on that. All right? So sales volume quotas, rupee volume, unit volume, you could have it by dollar volume, whatever you happen to do. These are okay, but I think profit-based quotas are better because they contribute more to margin. And as I said earlier, one of my favorite things as a sales manager, when I was a sales manager, to say to people was, volume's good, but margin's better, because margin's where you make the profit. Activity quotas, they are certainly popular, how many meetings, et cetera, you have a day, but quite frankly, they assume that efforts equal results, and that's not necessarily true. You can have very friendly but ineffective salespeople who you give 200 leads to, and I actually had a guy like this. Over 200 leads, he didn't close one sale. And then you have expense quotas. I tend to think that expense quotas really undermine the profit-based activity. I personally don't care how much my salespeople spend as long as their profit is high. Some people like to be sort of more controlling in that way. Motivation. If your salespeople are not motivated, it will make no difference how good your product is. It will make no difference how good your service is. Fact of the matter is, the world will not beat a path to your door just because you invented a better mousetrap. They must initiate action. Salespeople must motivate your customers, your potential customers, to buy. They must do this by being motivated by you to have intensity in what they do. And they need to be persistent. They need to be able to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and move on after rejection. These are the especially with outside salespeople, frequent rejection, physical separation from company support. They're not there where you can see them. They're not where they can talk to their friends. They're the guys sitting alone in the coffee shop and sitting in his or her car writing up sales orders and that sort of thing. If you ever look in a salesperson's car, if they're primarily automobile-based, you'll see that the passenger seat is basically an office. Direct influence on the quality of the sales presentation. Right? You want them motivated to give a good presentation. They believe in the company, they believe in the product, they believe in the service, they believe in the organization, and that comes through. And then it indirectly influences their performance. You need to have them desire to make an effort to fulfill a need. Right? They need to have direction. You need to give them that direction. You can't just say, go out and sell a bunch of stuff. And you need, again, intensity and persistence. And you need to give them the ability to do that. And I believe that this Maslow's hierarchy of needs is helpful in understanding where that comes from. What are people looking for? It's not just a paycheck. And I think this is especially true for those of you who are trying to hire younger salespeople. In Thailand, they get a lot of clients complaining they can't hire, and if they can't hire them, they can't keep good salespeople. And I think a lot of it has to do with a misunderstanding that people have about, people just come to work for a paycheck, and they don't. I mean, that's physiological needs. You get into these bad habits as a child. You want to live indoors. You want to eat, that sort of thing. You want to feel safe, reasonably secure in your job. You want to feel that you're a member of a team, that you're a member of a community, etc. And this is a big problem with outside salespeople, especially the salespeople who are making your big sales are not, in fact, hanging out with the boys. They're out there in the field. Then they have esteem needs. They want to feel important. Right? And then self-actualization. They want to be able to be the person that they dreamed about when they were children. A lot of this can be revolved around looking at their suggestions very carefully and trying to implement those you can. We saw some very, very interesting work like this with some building materials salespeople. And these folks got together, and what they really wanted to do was make a difference in the community. And some of you may be familiar with the global organization called Habitat for Humanity. Now, these guys proposed to their boss that the boss donate building materials to build a house, and these guys went out and built it on their days off. It was extremely important to them, right? Because these kinds of things, right, this intense job talent, full potential, creative expansion, achievement, respect, recognition is really the top of what you're doing. All right? This is where you get your best salespeople. And the best salespeople you ever met are doing this, right, are feeling this from their management. Process is sequential. The buying process, the selling process complement each other. These are training needs, but focus on the prospect's needs and wants. It is not about what I want to sell you. It is about what you need or want. I want a simple solution to this drafting problem. I happen to sell AutoCAD. I have a solution to your problem, not to my need to sell you something. Sell by design, not by chance. And there's a four-step process here. I think you can all read it. It is really very important that you identify with that. Identifying potential buyers. Somebody has a reasonable prospect of buying. You've got people that are shopping all the time, right? One of them is my wife. And the actual number of things that she buys is fortunately fairly small, or I'd be destitute. But the idea here is they actually have to have a need to justify a probable sale, have the resources to buy it. I might like to have a Mercedes-Benz stretch limousine, but I can't afford it. So if I come to your dealership, do I have the money, authority, and desire? Locating prospects, again, define the target market, communicate tools, get to those people, and then qualify the leads. Find the people who have the money, the motivation, the desire. And make sure when you're dealing with companies that you're dealing with somebody who actually has a decision-making authority. Pre-sale plan, pretty straightforward. You need to know the competitor's product because I know about it because he was in my office. So you want to be able to, without defaming the competitor, you want to be able to point out why your product's better, right? And then customer knowledge. What do I like? What do I want? Do I watch football? Situational questions. What's their situation? How will they decide? That sort of thing. Problem identification. What is it that's really at the bottom of their need? You can find superficial needs fairly easily. What's really at the bottom is what the problem is and what they're trying to solve. And that will be what will impact the cost and impact the sale ultimately. And questions are the answer. If you give a lecture like I've been giving tonight, you've lost it. Right? You want to ask questions, and you want them to be open-ended. You want to tie the emotion to logic. I mean, think about an automobile. A Mercedes-Benz stretch limousine will do exactly the same thing that a Volkswagen will. Okay? It'll drive you to work. It's legal to drive on the road, but they're different in the way we feel about them. Okay? And then the questioning process. Enable us to discover what they need. Right? Leave them open. Open door questions. Go where they like. Let them talk. The stimulus response method I'm not real popular with. It really is like the telephone sales kind of thing. My actual favorite is this need satisfaction method. Identify these people and what they need, what they want, and then the features, advantages, benefits of your product or your service come into play. Presentation has to attract attention, has to create interest, has to build desire, and most importantly, it must build the conviction that your organization could deliver and that your product will do it, and then you have to add for the sale. You have to initiate that. Handling objections. Objections are good. Objections are good things. A lot of people don't realize that. Good salespeople know this. Listen to the objection. What are they trying to tell you? Understand what they're talking about. Deeply understand. And then negotiate with them. Figure out what it is. Listen, rephrase, confirm the objection. Many people have felt that way in the past. However, on closer examination, what they have found is thus and so. It's called the feel, felt, found method, and for a sales manager, it's something that's absolutely imperative. If you're training your sales staff to do this, turn the objection into a benefit, and then a trial close. Ask for the sale. Be very, very, very careful about denying objections. If you tell them that's not true, you've lost. And then the other people who are your peers have felt that way. And then compensation for valid objections. If somebody has a valid objection with respect to the last stuff you sent in here was scratched, do something about it. Pre-plan what you're doing in a negotiation. If you walk into a negotiation with the idea that you have to have the deal, you have lost the negotiation. Predetermine what's firm and what's flexible. Define limits. No, as a matter of fact, I can't give you these for free. Ensure an atmosphere of trust, understanding, and mutual respect, and then define the purpose of the objection. Closing the sale, summarize advantages, disadvantages, and then direct close. Ask for the order. You've got to ask. Further information, you can get a hold of us. We engage around the world. Our website has some useful information. You can get more info directly from us. You can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn. More presentations like this, and this one will be at SlideShare link, and I also think the Madinah Institute keeps a wonderful archive of the presentations, and I believe recordings of the presentations. And you're certainly welcome to look at those and go to our take a look at SlideShare and see what we have there for you. I would be happy to take any questions or enter any discussions at this point.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kittredge, for a very wonderful presentation. Folks, we are open for Q&A, so if you have questions, you can either raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on your webinar console, or you could post your questions in the question box. I noticed there's a question already in the question box, so let me go over. This is from Brother Nasir Al-Fayz. The question is, I would like to request for an example of a margin-based quotas and then some guidance on how can we compensate our sales force in case they meet or exceed their quota.
Okay. An example of a margin-based quota system is if, for instance, we have a margin-based quota system for computers. You have a range. You can sell me this laptop computer for $100, or you can sell it to me for $150. Right? That's the range that you can work in. You cannot sell it to me for less than 100. You could sell it to me more than 150, but nobody's going to buy it because that's the market limit. Everything over the $100 is additional margin. So perhaps, and I haven't figured out the math on this. You need to figure out the math, obviously. But I get, in addition to my normal draw, I get 2% of all the margin over $100. Right? And if you amp that up, what I get then is a percentage of the total margin that comes in to the organization. In outside sales forces, depending on the product and that's and the volume and that sort of thing, I've seen ranges in the anywhere from 5 to 18%, depending on the product, the cost and the cost structure of the company. I have seen salesmen for machine tool companies driving very fancy cars and living very nice lives because they sold value. And the secret to margin-based selling is selling value, selling the value of the service that they're providing regardless of what the product is. Because salespeople ultimately are providing a service. You need these things to make your company run, whether it's manufacturing equipment or computer systems or consultation or anything. You need this stuff, right, to make yourself more competitive in the marketplace. And the more of that you sell, the more value you create, the higher the margin is to the company, and you compensate those people based on some percentage of that margin. Now, clearly, it depends on exactly margin schedules are and that sort of thing. But that's the essence of it. If I haven't answered your question, certainly feel free to come back and ask again or rephrase it. Now, what was the second part of the question, Ali?
So how can we compensate our sales force in case they meet or exceed their quota?
Oh, in a margin-based quota system, you really don't have to worry about the exceeding, because if, for instance, I am on a margin-based quota system and I am supposed to generate, I don't know, let's say $100,000 a month. Let's say I sell machine tools. Okay, and I'm supposed to generate on average $100,000 in margin every month. Okay, in other words, I'm supposed to generate gross profits in that amount. If I go to $150,000, what you're doing is you're incrementally increasing my percentage, because now instead of getting a percentage of 100,000 or a threshold of 100,000, I'm getting a percentage of the additional margin. Typically, outside sales forces are paid against what's called a draw. So you might say, okay, Bill, we're going to give you a salary of $2,000 a month against, which is your draw, against a commission on your sale. So if you have a margin-based system, then I have to, in order to earn my $2,000, and you have to figure this out mathematically in your own company, in order to hit my $2,000 and balance out the books, as it were, I need to have $100,000 in margin every month, let's say. Okay, so when I go over that, when I get $150,000, there is a percentage of that I get in addition to my base, as it's called. If I fail to meet my base on a consistent basis, then you either have a problem with the sales force or something else. But what you are doing then is, let's say my $2,000 a month is my base, and when I get to 150,000 or 200,000 in margin, I'm now making $6,000 a month, and that's how I'm being compensated. That's how the sales force is being compensated. Is that clearer?
Let's say if you need, in fact, we have a supplementary on the similar a relevant question again on margins. You said margins should be the focus, then profitability. How do you convert the same into setting targets or KPIs for Salesforce? As end of the day, only profitability is what we are evaluating on performance.
Okay. If I understand the question correctly, the question is margins and profits are not the same thing, and that's clear. But there should be a relationship between them. In other words, your company's basic budgetary plan, let's say we're making ceramic cups, coffee cups, okay? We know what it costs us to make a cup, right, based on a certain manufacturing volume. So we make 100,000 cups, and they cost us $0.10 a piece. So we then have to pay our HR people, we have to pay the taxes on the property our factory's on, we have to pay the people that run the factory, pay all of that, we roll that in, all right? That comes into our $0.10 a piece manufacturing costs, and then we've got administration, we've got marketing, we've got the sales activity cost itself, etc. You may have taxes, you may have other things that then come into your as indirect costs, whatever you'd like to call them. And so at a certain point, the company breaks even. Now, in many cases, when you have something like an article, the cost of manufacturing does not include these other costs. And so you've got a point at which the margin, if I'm selling these cups at 15 cents a piece by the gross, then the margin that we're getting on that might be 2 cents a cup. At some point, and again, this is a budgetary function, a mathematical function, you know that after you've sold so many, you've cleared all your ground costs, you've cleared all your base costs, you've cleared all your indirect costs, and you are now into profitability. Right? And if you calibrate that correctly, the rewards to the sales force based on the commissions that they're getting on margin will increment the profitability. In other words, you're controlling sales costs, because now that's your only variable cost. Once you've covered your indirect, your fixed costs, your manufacturing costs, etc., you are now in that area where additional marketing activities, additional sales activities have a cost, but that the margin is growing more quickly than the cost, because the costs are mostly fixed at that point, and so your profits are growing up until the point when, for instance, your marginal cost of production starts to accelerate. And that could happen if, for instance, we're making coffee cups and our production facility has a maximum capacity of 1 million cups a month. Well, the 1,000,001st cup, right, costs you a whole nother factory. Right, so at that point, things tip over again. But as long as you're within your production parameters, you have the opportunity to tie profits to margins.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Just one more short question.
Yeah.
From HR perspective,
Sure.
in your view, what is the most sought-out skill set that one should look for a salesperson during hiring process?
In my opinion, a salesperson must be personable and knowledgeable. And I realize I gave you two answers to the question when you asked for one. But I think those two are critical. Right? And I think that they are tied together, because if they're simply personable, if they are simply friendly, if they are the kind of person who walks up to you at a cocktail party and they've never seen you before and they say, "Hi, my name's Bill," and if you're ever at a cocktail party or any kind of social gathering with me, you will see me doing that. I like people. I like to meet new people. It's what I do. Allie's seen me at Mile. I just walk up to people I've never met and say, "Hi, how you doing?" I just do. So people have to have that outgoing personality. At the same time, they have to have the intelligence, at least, to be able to absorb any technical knowledge that's necessary to make the sales and to make the sort of technical aspects. Now, this is not to say that they have to be an engineer. Although what you will find if you look at pharmaceutical representatives, they tend to be pharmacists. In other words, they could be working in a drugstore, but they are talking to doctors about drugs because they have the technical background as well as the sort of personality components. If you look at the people that sell machine tools, they are very frequently engineers, typically manufacturing engineers, because they can talk to the people who are making decisions on those things as a peer. I did a lot of work with water and wastewater facilities for years, and when I walk in to somebody who does water and wastewater and I said, "I think you have an I&I problem," they immediately know that I know the business, because it's just part of the lingo that's used, if you will. So I think that those two things, but most important is that personality, because if they have the intelligence, you can educate them with the rest.
Okay, why do you think sales personnel are not good in planning, as you mentioned? There's another question, Bill. Why do you think sales personnel are not good in planning, as you mentioned? Well, and can we train them to think on long term, or they shall remain always the conflict?
Yeah. Well, I came up through sales, and then founded a couple of my own companies, and evolved, I guess, into sales management, and later on into sales and marketing management, and then off into the blue yonder. But most salespeople, and I'm talking about outside salespeople primarily, have that ability to, again, to go out into the wild world and survive and cut out their own sort of territory and make their own life happen. The difficulty is that it's very hard to explain to other people how you do that. And that is, Jack Welch said, from the gut. And so you find that they can't articulate, so they often cannot articulate what the sales process is, because it's inchoate with them. It's part of who they are. But they can't tell you, "I do this, then I do this, then I do this," as I broke down some of it today. And secondly, they do have a difficulty with long-term planning, and that is part of the personality that lets you pick yourself up after getting a rejection, or maybe 3 rejections in the first 3 days of the week, and getting out there on the 4th day of the week and making a sale. Because if you're thinking about long term, if you're thinking way down the road and you get these rejections, you lose your focus and immediacy. And I can tell you this from my own sales experience. You lose your focus and immediacy, and it's the next customer that you have to get up for. It's the next customer that you have to sell. It's the ones that happened before are relevant. But as a sales manager, you need to figure out, you need to be conscious both of the past, why did that person reject this, right? And you need to be thinking out 3 to 5 years, not focused on the call that I'm making tomorrow and researching that person, or the call that I'm making next week, or I'm going back to see an old customer in a week, which is the focus of the salesperson. They're taken to be very intense and very sort of present-day focused, if you will. Whereas in sales management, you have to be thinking down the line, all right, what does the sales forecast going to look like? Where am I going to get the salespeople that will replace the people that are retiring? How am I going to change this territory? How am I going to operationalize the marketing plan for this new product? How am I going to collect the information and analyze the information that I'm getting from my sales force? Because remember, it's not like the salespeople are coming in with a report, generally, of what's going on in the hustings. What they'll come in and say, you know, I was talking to Fred at A&K Manufacturing today. He said it'd be really neat if we could da-da-da-da-da. And then I was, you know, and somebody else come in and tell you that they were talking to somebody else at some other organization and they had this other idea. And what you're doing is you're aggregating that. They are looking at it often as an individual episode, all right, and are personalizing it. And that's good because you want your customers to know that your sales force empathizes with them and with their challenges and with the things they're doing. But from the perspective of the company, the question about whether or not Fred at A&K Manufacturing is worried about the cast collar, the cast iron he's getting, is a different issue than how you are going to enter a new market, with respect to this same cast iron problem. And it takes a transition. It is possible to transition salespeople, but I will say this, my own experience has been that it is a fairly long and arduous road and is frequently unsuccessful.
We have one last question from Mark Sturr. Mark, you've asked the question, and however, I've asked you to rephrase it.
Sure, I'd love to.
But let me ask you, it's a short question. Can anyone be a good salesperson?
No.
A very short answer too.
Most people will tell you, yes, some of the skills can be trained. I mean, absolutely true, right? But the fact of the matter is, I'm dealing with a fellow right now over in Cambodia, and he can barely bring. I've been working with his company for 3 months now. He can barely bring himself to call me by my first name. And I have asked him repeatedly to do so. He is so self-effacing. The idea that he would walk into your office and say, Allie, by golly, have I got a solution for you? Have you say no, I'm not interested, and then come to my office and do the same thing, and then finally go to the third person's office is absolutely out of the question. It just is not his personality. Could we teach him some of the nuts and bolts, the procedures of sales? Absolutely. Can we create that extroverted personality that is sensitive to the needs of others? Because salespeople often get a very bad rap, but the best salespeople are extremely sensitive to the needs and desires and tensions and goals of others. One of the best sales I ever made was to a fella who was a draftsman at this machine. They made machinery that takes the husks off corn automatically, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was a big deal for them. It's their whole business. And he, in the worst way, wanted to be something more than a draftsman. And so while I was working with him, we implemented an AutoCAD system, and that was a good thing. It was a good thing, but he really wanted to be more. And one of the things that we started talking to him about was they got this automated machining center, and I said, well, what you could do is get rid of the blueprints and hook your computer that you're designing these things on directly to the machining center, and I didn't do this, he sold the idea to his boss, and we implemented this thing, and his entire career got upgraded. He became the manufacturing design manager And the last time I saw him, he had this this sort of little cartoon thing that showed how the husker harvester worked. And so he had these little pictures of corn with the green stuff still on it and going through the machine, coming out the other end, the little things flying off, and the corn proceeding on its way into the processing plant, and he was having a great time, and it changed his life. But when I first met him, the first year and a half, 2 years that we were working together, he was a draftsman. I mean, all he did was make copies of drawings and stuff, and draft up ideas that other people had, and he really wanted to be more. And it's that empathy that I mean, anybody could have sold about AutoCAD, I think. I mean, I don't know, but I think they could have, right? But once we started actualizing him, I mean, then I got to, it wasn't even my business, but I got to hand off to a colleague the sales of the computers into the office and everything else. I mean, it was just one of these things that developed. And that's something that is just very hard to train. It's like anybody be a good poker player, and the answer is no. Because you can read their face, right? And if you can read their face, they can't play poker because you know what it's in their hand. And I think the same thing with really good salespeople. But I will, having said that, I will say that techniques can be trained, and people who are in sales can become better technically, and that may even lead to them being more self-confident. But it really is that ability to get yourself up in the morning and go out and talk to people you don't know, who in many cases don't want to see you in the first place, and figuring out ways to get to them that make sense to them. One of the things that I did when I was in the medical market, I was selling computer systems into doctors' offices. And the doctors don't want to talk to you, right? So I would make an appointment like a patient, right? I would pay for the appointment, the initial appointment, to talk to them, right? And that so impressed them that I would then get to talk to their office manager, who really did the business and that sort of thing. It was just showing a little respect for their time in some ways. So I think that that sort of creativity and that sort of thing, it's difficult to train. It's just that flexibility of mind. So I guess that's a longer answer to the no.
Well, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar, and we really want to thank you, Dr. Kittredge, on behalf of MAL, for this excellent presentation and illustrating the practical application of sales techniques and the management that you described from the sales operations and how to build relationships and covering all the spectrum of the sales operations, basically. So any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Just that, I will say it once again, sales is the only function that generates revenue. If you don't get it right, you don't have anything. I wish you all the best of luck and the greatest of good fortune in your businesses.
Thank you very much once again, for your time and valuable information that you shared. And thank you all of those who participated. Folks, we are recording this webinar, which will be uploaded on MAL Community, and you will get an email from us once it's uploaded. Thank you very much. You all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum.